This short lecture is going to show you how to read the weather map and the symbols that they put on the weather map. First, every station is going to have a circle that's going to tell you the cloud cover, and then they're going to have a series of data on the outside that tells you different information. So you can think of this as a square. So I'm going to refer to them as the upper right or upper left hand corner, lower left, etc. So first, in the upper left-hand corner, the number 64 is representing temperature. Between the upper left and the lower right-hand corner, we have a weather symbol. Sometimes they put the weather symbol on the station maps of the surface maps, but not always. In the lower left-hand corner, 58 here represents the dew point. Like I said earlier, the circle represents the cloud cover, so we can think of this as a percent. So about 75% of the sky is covered with clouds. The upper right-hand corner is the sea level pressure. Some areas aren't at sea level, so they adjust the pressure to be represented at sea level so that we can compare any city at sea level pressure. Now, if you remember, sea level pressure is usually around 1,013 millibars. So that's nowhere close to 1,013 millibars. The reason for that is because we need to save space on these surface maps. So they cut off the first digit, either being a 9 or a 10, and they only put the last 3 digits. Then this last number is actually decimal. So we would put the decimal here and then add the 9 or 10 in front. So here's the rule. If the reported value is greater than 500, the initial 9 is missing. So for example, if I see 872 on a surface weather map, this is greater than 500. So I'm going to add a 9 in front of it, and then again move the decimal one spot over. So it'll be 982.7 millibars. To double check, you should always get around 1,000 millibars. If the reported value is less than 500, then that means the 10 is missing. So 027 is less than 500, so add a 10 on the front and move the decimal point one spot over, so it'll be 1,002.7 millibars. The line coming out of the circle represents the wind barb. Now this will change location depending on the direction of the wind. Remember, wind is always named from the direction it comes from, not to where it goes to. Typically with reading weather maps, this is the one data point where students often get confused. They think of this as like maybe a flag and the wind's blowing this direction, but it's not. It's always pointing towards the circle, so it's going this way. Now the lines coming off the end of the barb tell you the wind speed. A long line represents 10 knots and a short line represents 5. Now, a question I often get is, what happens if there's only one line? How can you tell if it's long or short? If it were short, it's never going to be at the very end. It would be indented a little bit, so you'd have a little leftover wind barb sticking out. This is an example of all of the data that could potentially be on a surface data. Looks like we have a full cloud cover, so that'd be overcast. Your wind here is coming from the northeast. There are 2 long lines, so that'd be 10 and 20 knots. There's your temperature we talked about, your weather, your dew point. Here's your pressure. It's less than 500, so that means you're going to add the 10 onto it. And one thing I forgot to add previously is the amount of precipitation. So that's going to be in the lower right-hand corner. This is a key for the common weather symbols that you may see. So over here is the cloud cover. So if it's an empty circle, that's clear, broken, etc. So you can see the cloud cover here. The wind, this is the actual specific scale. If it's just a straight line, 1 to 2 knots, see how the This line is indented. It's not all the way at the end. That's your 5 knots. But this line is all the way at the end, so that's going to represent your 10 knots. From there, you can just add them. So there's one long line, there's a short line, so that's 10 plus 5 is 15 knots. 2 long lines, 10 and 20. Other things you might see on a weather map are your front symbols. Dry line, we talked about those. And then these are your weather symbols. This is just a continuation of the key. For the wind barbs, if you get a flag, the flag represents 50 knots. Occasionally, we can't see the sky. Maybe a camera might be broken, or maybe, I don't know, a leaf landed on the observation center, something, or maybe it's covered with snow. Whatever the reason, if we can't see the data, you'll get an X in the front, so you know that we don't know what the sky cloud cover is.